Let's talk to Daniel in Iowa, farmer's wife, or Daniela, excuse me. You're on the air.
That's okay. Thanks, Alex. You know, I think that this just goes to show that you know, things are financially bad, and this is a way that the government can come in and make money and use fear and intimidation tactics against us. We had an interesting situation happen about 2 months ago. I had looked outside our window. We lived down a very desolate gravel road in the middle of nowhere, and there was a car, and I thought it was quite odd. It was just sitting alongside the road, and it sat there for a very long time. There's 3 people that live on the road, and it sat up at my neighbor's, and then it came down the road, and it didn't sit at my house, but then it sat up at his grandma's house for a while, and about a half an hour later, I got ready to leave. I'm driving down the gravel road, come to a stop sign, and the car's still sitting there. And so I stop and I roll my window down, and it's this really sweet 70-year-old woman sitting in the car. And I said, "Ma'am, is everything okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm just driving around, making notes, taking down people's addresses." And I thought that was really, really odd.
Well, they've been coming up and GPSing, especially rural areas, for decades. But now the census is to be year-round and even monthly. And they're GPSing your door. They're talking to your neighbors about you. And it's just, they're using the name of the census to put HUMET on the ground. We already knew about this 3 years ago, but now it's been announced. All of the major postal service trucks are going to have wireless scoops on them, stealing all the data, and also anti-terror sensors on them. The police cars are getting face scanners on them, license plate readers. I mean, look, the Defense Department's foreign owned. It's big business. They've conquered the whole world. We financed the takeover, and now they're going to come here and turn this whole country into a giant Fallujah, Abu Ghraib control system. And I'm not just saying that. You've heard the troops call in and go, "Yeah, we set up TSA checkpoints 3-4 years ago, groping the women, body scanning." MIT admits that the system they've set up in Iraq was designed for here, a giant prison. And you're going to get inspections as a prisoner. You're not going to have a garden without a proper authorization and inspection. You might grow marijuana. And if you grow marijuana, that's going to cut in on the price of the marijuana they ship in. This is corporate takeover. I mean, they've taken over every industry. They've taken over talk radio in almost every area. They've taken over the farming, the ranching. They're taking everything over. They're taking the family over. They're coming out and lobbying government to make you take more vaccines. You know, to have Rick Perry come out and say it's the law, your kids have got to take shots. I appreciate your call. Any comments on what Danielle was saying there, Bob Chapman?
No, but we've seen instances of that, as you pointed out, with the census and the excuse for these people to be there. And, you know, if you see people around, you know they're up to something, because people shouldn't be in those areas, especially sitting in a vehicle, you know, for some period of time.
Well, I would have said, "Who are you here for?" And I guarantee you it would have been the census. You see, if they, quote, can't get all the data they want, they go to your neighbors. And again, it's all part of hiding in plain view. What's the name they use in Scarface? You want a Chavano on every corner, watching you, telling you what to eat, when to sleep, what to wear. You want to be a sheep? Bah, bah, bah. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. I want to go back to more calls from farmers in Hawaii, Texas, and Kristen, who never got on yesterday, in a moment. But Bob, just briefly, I mean, obviously you predicted, unfortunately, everything that's happened, but just a brief synopsis. What happened this week with the global meltdown accelerating, with gold exploding, and where is it going in the future?
Well, I think in America, the seat of the changes was the intercession by S&P downgrading the United States government's rating on paper, their bonds. And this was done, and the other 2 rating agencies didn't do that. This was done in order to, as far as I can see, chop up the benefits of Social Security as well as the Medicare. And, of course, the other part of what they did had nothing to do with that directly, but they wanted to impose this, what I call the Obama Enabling Act, which is bypassing Congress. But those things, when they happened, caused the markets to become unsound, at least on a short-term basis, and they were going up and down 500 or 600 points a day. The market is in a weakened condition because investors, professionals, they buy earnings down the road 6 months to a year from now. Generally speaking, most of them are long-term investors, and the earnings for S&P companies are going to go down this coming year, and during the last half of this year as well. And instead of making $13, $130 a share, they probably make 60 or 70, and that's a big difference. So fundamentally, the market should come down, and this thing disrupted. At the same time, of course, the President's Group in Financial Markets, they went in and they first attacked silver, and then they attacked gold, and they increased the margin requirements on gold. And that's not so bad because that has a short-term effect. And most of the people who are in the Forex markets today and in the COMEX, the LBMA London, are pretty big hitters. And
well, that's what I was about to say. They did this 4 months ago, increased margins, and it knocked it down for a while. This time, it didn't even really knock it down. It just stopped the run, and it really shows they're running out of bullets and getting desperate as the world realizes they're going to devalue the dollar down to basically nothing. You know, the fact that I think I saw last night the cover of Time is going to be the end of Europe, the collapse of Europe. So it's clear that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and now the SEC is going to investigate Standard & Poor's and find out if George Soros did get that tip. So this is getting crazier and crazier, Bob, but clearly this signifies the fact that they're pretty much admitting we're in a depression.
You're right about that, and it's an inflationary depression and has been for the last 2.5 years. And that will continue because they got to do a QE3 type of thing. I'm looking for $2.5 billion that they'll create in order to keep the system going sideways. And if they don't do that, you know, it's a minus 5% of GDP, and that'll feed on itself, and then deflation will take over, and they don't want that. And they're not near that now because they're smothering it and have for 11 years.
Okay, real briefly, where's gold going? Where's gold going?
It's gonna bottom out in here probably early next week, and that'll be the end of the correction. And it's good because it went up pretty fast. It's come back. It'll settle in, and it'll move towards 2,000, and it could hit it in September. And maybe even sooner, for all we know.
What do you make of J.P. Morgan saying 2,500 by the end of the year?
Yeah, well, let me tell you my take on that. I've been doing this a long time, and I know how their minds work. JPM didn't want to come out with that, but they had to, and I'll tell you why. Because they know gold is going higher soon. They said by the end of the year. I say by the end of February, because that's usually the end of the big season in gold on the plus side. And what they're doing here is setting up a blocker. They want everybody to think gold's going to 2,500, but it isn't going any higher because they know it's going higher. So they want to stop it, cut it off at the pass, so to speak. So that's their thinking in that. It's good for us because they've admitted they know where gold's going. Now we're going to tell them, we know what you're doing, and it's going to 3,000, 3,200 by the end of the year or by the end of February. And silver will go right with it, and they're buried in silver, and they can't get out.
And by that, they made a lot of naked shorts and things to try to keep it down, and this really is a debacle, and it exposes their fiat currency and its global devaluation. Let's go to Christine in Arizona. Christine, thank you for holding. You're on the air with Bob Chapman.
Hi. I have a deeply disturbing question. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know why it hasn't been posted. But Obama is going to the Congress to ask them to suspend a banking law to allow them to lease directly to tenants. Now,
No, ma'am. I have seen the articles, and I mentioned it. He first floated it a month ago and then again last week, but you're right. In fact, I should have covered this. Absolutely. So now it all gets pooled. The bankers get everything paid, but now you live for the government. It's basically millions more Americans going on a weird form of government housing, and federal courts have ruled you don't have any Fourth Amendment rights when you live in government housing. Yes, that is big news.
Well, the problem is if you were a banker, which would you rather do? Would you rather lease to somebody, or would you rather loan and take a chance on the loan going down? I mean, if this goes through, it'll never come back. We're now where we were in the days of serfs and lords. The real estate
That's
industry,
always been the plan. Look, people keep asking, is Obama trying to destroy the free market? And the answer is no. He's a teleprompter reading frontman. The mega banks that all these conservatives worship all day, the big corporations are anti-free market. They're buying the Republicans as well to shut down our economies. They're criminal scum, and people better get upset. In fact, there's the New York Times. And yes, they're moving now. That's L.A. Times. I also saw it in the New York Times. But I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead.
What they're, he retooled his article to say, we want to do this because there's so many foreclosed properties out there, we want to get them rented. But the bottom line is, once they change that law, it'll never get changed back. And unless you have cash.
Well, ma'am, they've given tens of trillions to foreign banks, and the news did reports a few years ago saying if you'd have given that money to the people with houses that were upside down, it would have paid for all the houses 100% more. Again, in the name of, they claim that, oh, this is happening to the economy because of mortgages. It had nothing to do with it. It was the overall derivatives. And Bob Chapman comments on that.
Yes, and 8 years ago, I said that Fannie and Freddie were broke. Everybody in the Beltway knew it. They would go under, and the end of what they're trying to do, and now this is 8 years ago, is to nationalize housing. And this is exactly what that speech was about.
They've already taken over GM and then gave them $5 billion to move to China and Brazil. I mean, it's pure treason.